Hello everyone, AJ here with Blue to Green. So this episode is going to be particularly troubling for some people, unfortunately, and I didn't censor anything in our content. So none of the words or anything was censored between my guest, Detective Randy Snyder. Detective Snyder is a retired Internet Crimes Against Children detective, and what he did is he hunted predators online who preyed against our most precious children. So with that being said, I wanted to be able to have an open and candid conversation with Detective Snyder, and I'm going to be able to, I'm going to put this up on all the different platforms. And I don't want to ever monetize or receive a penny off of a situation like this or off of a topic like this. So if this video somehow is allowed to be monetized and gets disseminated, and if there's any profit from this video, I'm going to donate it to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. If it's $5 or $500, I don't care. But with that being said, I have a conversation with Detective Snyder, and this is more of a conversation as opposed to an interview, meaning that him and I just share stories and bounce stuff off of each other. And I allow him the opportunity to talk about what he wants to talk about, having done the job for so long. He shares some of his personal voyage of having to deal with the trauma and the stress of seeing such things and having to deal with taking on the personal trauma of somebody else's victimization in order to save someone, in order to save a child from a horrific situation that's currently happening all across this country and all. So I know that sounds dramatic, but it's not. It's the reality, and it's the reason why good officers, good detectives go to work every day to help bring those people to justice and help keep our kids safe. Thank you very much, everyone, for watching, for supporting me, and let's help get the message out. I'm going to post this on every platform that I know of in hopes that it can at least be seen by somebody, because I hate censorship. And I don't feel as though we should censor our words in order to have important conversations like this. So, especially in an educational format. So thank you again, everyone. I sincerely appreciate it. Take care.
All right, he threw some things out of the car, right? We're right there. He's throwing some things on the passenger side. They're along the wall, the slow lane wall. 619, he's throwing dope out the window. We got bills of marijuana coming out.
619, I copy bills of marijuana coming out of the window at 2328.
Yeah, the way the tracks are and everything like that. So yeah, let's get started. Mr. Randy Snyder, thank you very much for joining us. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
So let's, first and foremost, you wrote a book.
I did.
You wrote a book. Let's see if I can get it in focus here. We'll put the link up, but it's called
Cyber
It doesn't
Creeps.
like, there you go. There we go. I had to cover your face. Yep, Cyber Creeps. So let's get a little bit back into your background and what you're doing here and why you're on the podcast.
Okay. I've been a peace officer now for this year's 25. I started out with the sheriff's office back in 2000 and started out in patrol, just kind of did the regular thing, promoted to corporal for a couple of years, and then went into investigations. And when I started in investigations, it was persons crimes, but it was primarily child crimes. The majority of the work is child crimes. And I was getting into the child abduction response team. Okay. I was getting into a lot of the child sex crimes and really focusing on those because I felt like that was where I could make the most impact.
Sure.
And about 4 years in, I had worked a couple of internet crime cases, but nothing too much. They just happened to trip across them. And I was working on doing more research and getting into like the human trafficking side and a lot of the computer side of it. And my captain came to me one day and he goes, "Hey, Randy, I want you to go in and see what an ICAC detective is and what the qualifications would be and what you would need to do it, and then write it up so we can create the position and then make sure to apply." I was like, well, the perfect ICAC agent is a 6-foot white male. But I was able to kind of turn that into a position for the sheriff's office. And the first thing that they did was they sent me to Phoenix to the Arizona ICAC task force, so that I could kind of learn the ropes. And it was amazing because it was in the FBI building, which I thought was really cool. Right. And I got up there and like 3 days in, the commander said, "Hey, do you want to be a TFO? You want to be up here full time?" I'm like, So talked my command staff into it, and I ended up on the team for about 2 years, and then came back to county and finished out my 20-year retirement just doing all of the ICAC stuff for the county. And
ICAC is Internet Crimes Against Children.
Correct.
For those who don't know.
Right.
Yeah, we got to lay a little bit of a foundation for the people who don't know this stuff.
Right.
When did you start doing the internet crimes?
So my first case working internet crimes was in 2012.
Okay.
And at that time, we had a computer forensic examiner who was doing it kind of on the side as well. And he was out on light duty for something. And he goes, "Hey, I want you to help me with this case." And after digging into it, after really seeing what it was and getting into it, I was like, man, this is it's intense.
Yeah.
And the investigation, I always love digging into stuff. And so to be able to dig into it from so many different sides really appealed to what I like to do. And then...
Totally good. I forgot my diffuser on, and it makes a bubbling noise, and the camera loves that bubbling noise.
Okay.
Hold on a second. There we go. Told you, something will...
There we go.
Now the damn thing won't shut off. Turn the F off. I was looking at that going, damn it, I forgot about that. Okay, there. Here, I'll just unplug it.
There you go.
Sorry about that. I saw that and was like, damn it. Again, I'm a one-man show, so I gotta do everything myself. So I apologize for the interruption.
No worries.
Please continue.
Then I had a couple other cases that involved, computers and things like that. And I thought, man, this is cool. So I went up to ICAC in 2014 and started doing that full time.
Okay.
And I hate to say I loved it because of what we were dealing with, but at the same time, the complexity of the investigations was a good challenge. I liked the challenge of being able to figure out, you've got somebody that's got a screen name and an IP address.
No.
And that's it.
Yeah.
And you got to hunt this person down and find them. And I was hooked on that part of it.
You liked hunting people.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I can't remember which author it was that said there was no greater thrill in hunting than to hunt another human being. And I know it was meant in a totally different fashion than that. But the thrill of being able to really sink my teeth in and bulldog through it. I enjoyed it. And then, add to it the satisfaction of saving a kid. One of my first big cases in 2015, it was a priority 1 case. And at the result of it, we rescued 3 kids that we know of from abuse. And we can't even calculate the number of kids who were touched, secondhand or incidentally, because we were able to take, out of that one case, we were able to take a half a dozen offenders off the road.
Okay.
And the spiral of that, the subsequent cases that we built from what we learned on that case, it ended up touching 33 states and 8 countries.
Wow.
So
that's amazing.
It was one of those things where we know we've saved hundreds of kids just by taking those people off the street, just by, getting them out of circulation. Now, unfortunately, we still know that there's millions more, but the satisfaction of knowing that, those kids were saved, and I can point to names and faces of those kids are no longer being abused. That's why we do it.
Now, this is the hard part for people to understand is that, I have a very, very strange and diverse population of listeners and all that. And I'm not talking to just cops in any way, shape, or form. And you hear these stupid things, and we'll tie it all back in. But here, defund the police, get rid of this, get rid of that. And what people don't realize is that, okay, just because you saw a video of an officer violated somebody's rights on a traffic stop, that doesn't encompass all the other police officers that are doing detective work and doing good work on the back end. You defund those, you're going to be taken out of the office and put back in a squad car. And some child who's being currently abused is going to continue to be abused and molested. And there's just no clean way to talk about this stuff.
Right. And the to that very point, it's the specialty units that get hurt first.
Amen.
And the intent may be to take a bad cop off the street or to provide more training so that incidents aren't occurring that may have been accidental or just poor tactics or whatever the case. But it's the specialty units that get hurt, and ICAC saw it. In 2020, right off the bat. Not only did we see a huge influx because of COVID in the number of cases that were coming across. I mean, there were times in April of 2020 when all of the lockdowns were done that the National Center was seeing over 1 million cases a week being sent out or being, transferred in to be disseminated. And at the same time, you've got all of these officers who can't go to work. You have all of these supervisors that aren't letting them go and serve search warrants. You have all of this defund the police that was going on that was taking away the funding. And yet the workload quadrupled overnight.
Yeah, that's the problem is that now when it comes down to the lockdown specific, I heard some interesting things about that particularly was that now you had children who are now stuck in homes with their offenders.
Right.
They weren't able to go to school where where your teachers, principals, all those that work around there are mandatory reporters.
Right. And
could you just explain what a mandatory reporter is when I use terms like that?
Well, so in Arizona, any person that has access to or control of a child is technically a mandatory reporter. If you find that child is being abused, either physically, sexually, emotionally, you are mandated to contact either law enforcement or Department of Child Safety. And so especially with teachers, principals, coaches, stuff like that, they are scrutinized even more heavily. Mm-hmm. I mean, the common Joe citizen, just because you may come in contact with children, probably doesn't recognize that they're a mandatory reporter.
Right.
Teachers get taught on it.
Right.
They get trained on it. And so if you have a kid that's coming in and displaying symptoms of having been abused, of having been exploited, of having been molested, and that teacher, that safe place isn't there anymore. And now instead of being stuck with their offender at home for 8 or 10 hours a day, now it's 24 hours a day.
Yeah.
The amount of abuse went up significantly. And the other thing that we saw is because everybody was at home and now you have work that's being done by the computer and by the internet. You have school that's being done by computer and by internet. You have nothing better to do than sit around and once you've finished Netflix, what are you going to do? You're going to go online.
Right.
The kids are online a lot more than they were. They didn't have that 8-hour break a day where they weren't on their tablets or on their video games or whatever. And so you had that many more offenders on for that much more time. You had that many more vulnerable children on for that much more time. And the numbers skyrocketed. You
have parents who are working, so they're not paying attention. They're giving little Johnny and little Susie the iPad or whatever and saying, here, just go do your business and don't bother me. I'm working, unfortunately.
And beyond that, you have a lot of parents that aren't as technically savvy as their kids are with the electronics.
True.
And so what you end up with is kids being handed devices, and the parents don't even know that there's parental controls and safety features and things like that. And so these kids they're being handed a loaded gun and told, try not to shoot yourself.
That's a valid analogy. We dove right into everything, and that's exactly totally fine with what I wanted to do. I want to hear all your information. A couple things. You're not here representing any police department or sheriff's office. So you're here speaking on your own First Amendment rights. However, the particular department that you work for doesn't have a problem with allowing you guys to speak your minds. Thank God.
So far, they haven't.
Right.
We'll, new year, new administration, but I don't expect that to change much as long as what I say isn't derogatory.
Well, Mr. Teeple has sat in that chair as well, and we've had a conversation.
He has.
So I have, and I said it before, and I put a post up on it. I have nothing but love and respect for your sheriffs. I didn't work for your department for the crowd. I didn't work for the same agency. I work for the state. You work for a county, and the level of access that I have to you guys is insane because your department's just created that culture of being good with the community. With that being said, I just wanted to give a little shout out to the department and also just kind of make that information known. Page 23 of your book. I'm going to do a little Jocko style here. I'm wearing a shirt, so I might as well do a little style by him.
Over the course of my career, I would interview children who had been physically and sexually abused. Offenders who preyed on children in person and online and spent more time learning about social media applications and participating in online chats than some actual teens do. Who knew that as a result of my success, I'm not laughing because it's funny, you will see in a second. Who knew that as a result of my successes in undercover personas, I would become a deputy who was later referred to by Sheriff Mark Lamb as the best 14-year-old in the county.
And he usually did it without any sort of preface or explanation. And so people would look at me like, what
does that mean? And the next part, this is one of my favorite parts of your book so far, is that, of course, it was also said by the sheriff that because of the number of offenders I interacted with, I saw more dicks than most prostitutes.
Also, sadly, probably true. And that particular comment, so I remember that. I had a sign on my office door that said, caution.
Sure.
You never know what I was looking at when I was working. Right. I may have been reviewing images from a scene. I may have been chatting with somebody. I may have been in an online chat board where the CSAM was child sexual abuse material was being traded, and so he didn't heed the warning one day.
Oh no! And
I was chatting with an offender who was trying to abuse my undercover persona and was in the process of discussing and demonstrating some of the activities he wanted to engage in. And Sheriff Lamb walked in and looked at my computer screen and went, whoa, and took a step back and walked out. I said, that's why the sign is there. And most people did not break the plane of the door without asking if there was anything on my screen. But yeah, he made that comment because unfortunately it's disturbingly common for predators to be online, and they have no problem showing that to what they believe is a kid. They hope to show it to a kid, and I had no problem finding people that wanted to do that sort of thing.
There's so much to cover. There's so many questions. It's the sort of thing where, from a police standpoint and a police perspective, you're being repetitively exposed to the most horrific acts of society.
Right.
This is one of the things that I talk about as well as trauma and PTSD, and we'll get there in a minute. I don't want to rush into that. But the fact of the matter remains is that these are such traumatic events that affect the offenders for life. The victims for life. And your role is to literally sit there and watch that stuff over and over and over again.
There were days where we would, if we were reviewing a computer that we had gotten, we may review 10,000 images and videos in a single day. And I'm doing this when, my kids were little. My daughters were 3 and 6 when I started in ICAC. And so I'm spending 10, 12 hours a day watching children be sexually abused and molested and the worst possible things people can't even imagine happening, and then going home and playing dad, being a scoutmaster, being a football coach, being a father to my 2 girls, all of those things. And it definitely, it builds up, it takes a toll. It is something that the public doesn't always recognize.
They have no idea. They have no idea.
Yeah.
They have no idea.
That we're doing this because we want to protect those kids, because we will willingly take that trauma on ourselves to make sure that some other kid doesn't have to do it, or that some kid that is being abused, that we can try and stop that.
That's the conversation that I had with, I'm friends with another one of the detectives, and it's you guys, law enforcement takes on the trauma of others,
right,
and deals with it. And from my own personal experiences, it's like, it's a thankless job, obviously. Like, I don't want to go down the path of there are shithead officers that are going to do stupid things and make the rest look bad. I'm not here to talk about that. I don't give a shit about their creeps in and of itself.
Right.
The officers that are just doing this job on a thankless basis and doing this and just repeated trauma over and over and over again. That's why, and this is also like when I'm going all over the place. I apologize. When I got into law enforcement, I did my patrol and I did this and I did that. I never once even thought to go and do child crimes. I never even once thought to do it. When I got to my detective position is when my supervisor came and asked, hey, we're starting to move into specialty. Who wants to do this? And I had a long, hard conversation with myself. Like, is this something I really want to do?
Right.
It was like, do I really want to go down this path and dive into it? And I felt called to it. I'm a Christian man, and I believe in that I was led down that path,
right,
to go and do that job.
And that's why all of the books, when I sign them with Romans 3:14. I have it tattooed. Romans 3:14. Romans 13:4.
Okay.
My brain's
Same
not
numbers.
working yet. Yeah. I need one more cup of coffee. Romans 13:4 really spoke to me the entire time that I was doing child crimes, because that was what motivated me. Knowing that I was going out there and I was taking these people off the street, and that was one less asshole that was going to go after my kids. Yeah. And when I had cases, I had one case when I was up in the task force that it had come through the FBI, and the FBI agent that was on the task force said, "Hey, Randy, this is over in kind of your area. Do you want this?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure, no problem. I'll take it." And I look at it, the address. And so, I'm driving home from work that day and stopping at the next block over to go make contact with the victim, and to go make contact with her folks, and to go figure this case out and deal with it. And when it hits that close to home, you can't help but take some of that in and personalize it. And knowing that it hits that close to home was even more motivating for me to go, I got to get these guys, because this is in my neighborhood.
That dude's walking down your street, walking his dog.
Well, and the scary part about that is the guy wasn't in my neighborhood. The victim was in my neighborhood. Oh. The suspect was in Canada.
Okay.
He had such a reach because of the internet that he was offending against a child in Arizona from Canada. And he had, when we eventually got him identified and Canadian authorities went and hit his house, he had like 30 other victims around both Canada and the U.S. And parents don't understand that just because your kid is in their bedroom doesn't make them safe from the offender on the other side of the world online. And I've had cases in Australia, I've had cases in England, in Spain, all over the world, where it's everywhere now. And you can't protect your kids with the same stranger danger talk and the same thought of they're not outside, they're not on the street, they're not being contacted by the creepy guy in the white panel van, and think that they're safe. And parents need to understand that.
So let's go down that path. One of the things that's always been taught is stranger danger, white van, and all that good stuff. And this, through the advent of this, and through the cell phones and the internet, like you said, this has made the reach just so much larger and more personal. And it was always my understanding that I didn't do ICAC, I didn't do internet crimes. There was an internet component to it. So this is fresh information to me and a fresh understanding. Like I understand the background of it, but I never did that aspect. Mine was more, this happened, that's the offender, there's the victim, there's a suspect, and then doing the investigation.
Right.
But again, there was an internet component to it. So I was taught that, it was 80% of all sexual contact, sexual assaults of children is usually somebody that they know. It's usually someone who has access to the child, and it's usually an unrelated adult male.
Right.
That's the numbers.
Familial hands-on abuse is primarily somebody in the home or somebody known to the home. Grandparent, uncle, friend of the family, whatever the case. But with the internet, what we're seeing is the exploitation and abuse that may not necessarily be hands-on, is significantly larger outside of the immediate community because there's such a huge reach to the internet.
So, okay, so let's take this case that suspect is in Canada. Was that person being coerced to send videos? Were they offending others? But like, how does that particular situation work? Where that, like I said, let's just focus on that case and we can delve out from there.
So that particular case, the individual had contacted the victim through social media.
Okay.
And had done just enough research because unfortunately people put too much information online to know what school she went to, a general idea of where she lived, things like that. And he ingratiated himself into her life as, hey, I'm your buddy, I'm your friend, we'll talk about this, whatever. And when he finally got her to take that one little, I I hate to call it innocent, but one little, like bra pic or whatever. At that point, he was like, now I own you.
Okay.
And I know who your teachers are. I know who your principal is. This is your principal's email address. I'm going to email this to your principal. Should I send this to your pastor? I'll send this to your pastor. I can send it to your parents. He had figured out through the social networking who her parents were, who her friends were, all of the information that he needed to extort additional pictures from her. And he went for almost a year contacting her and saying, you're going to send me a picture of you doing this. You're going to send it right now, hitting her up at school, hitting her up in the middle of the night, hitting her up when she's driving in the car with her folks, and would tell her, you're going to do what I want, when I want, how I want, and you're going to do it right now, or I'm going to send all of this out to everybody in your friends list. I'm going to send this to your teacher. And she got to the point where she finally disclosed to her parents that this was happening, because she had come to the conclusion that she was either going to tell her parents and deal with the consequences or kill herself. And she was to that point that she was starting to make those plans, and decided to roll the dice with her folks before she did that. And thank God she did.
Amen.
Because not only were we able to get her out of that situation, we were able to get a lot of other people that he was doing the same thing to out of that situation. And he even said, I hope this hurts. I hope this destroys you. I hope this damages you. And ironically enough, just to show that, these people are not one-time creeps.
Right. Right. That's something I want to talk about. Yeah. 100%.
While he was out on bond, he started doing it again, and the police had to go back over to his residence and arrest him a second time.
I believe in the American justice system that you are innocent until proven guilty. And then you run into situations like that. And it's like, that's one of those things where, how do you deal with that?
Once the guilt is so overwhelmingly evident, it's hard to think, okay, they need to have a trial process, right, and they need to have the full due process and a defense attorney to argue it and all of these other things, because unfortunately what we find sometimes is when these go to juries, the lawyer tricks, the little bits of minutia that most people don't know about can impact that case. And this guy, especially because he was being handled by Canadian courts, got a slap on the wrist, comparatively speaking. And we see that even within the United States, though. I had one offender that when I contacted him, he was already registered federally because he had gotten busted by the feds. He was also already registered by the state of California because he had gotten a second offense by the state of California. And now here he's offending again, and I'm getting ready to hit him with a third charge, or a third offense, after he'd already been convicted twice. And the courts in California really didn't do much of anything to him. He got a very minimal prison sentence, just a couple of short years, and then he was done.
You talked about it in your book. Again, I'm referencing your book. I was intelligent, and I wrote shit down, and I highlighted stuff. There does appear to be this very strange push to normalize this.
There is.
And it's one of these things where I don't comprehend. I forget what page it is. I'm scrolling a bunch of stuff. You had stated that, basically that, here we go. Okay, here we go. You talk a lot about what offenders do and all that, but like there are organizations that are attempting to normalize this type of behavior, like NAMBLA, the National Man-Boy Love Association, and its feminine counterpart. I've heard of NAMBLA before, but I never heard of this. And its feminine counterpart, Butterfly Kisses, who push for legislation to legalize sex between adults and minors. What the fuck is going on?
And beyond that, when we started seeing the woke mob waking up a couple of years ago, and this push to rename everything, there was a push in Colorado bought into it where they're no longer allowed to be called sexual predators. They're no longer allowed to be called sex offenders because, well, that's mean and that's degrading and that's bad for them. They should be called minor attracted persons.
Nope.
And there's a huge push
Nope.
for the minor attracted person to be the term that's used. There are other organizations that are attempting to normalize it to the degree that they want to say that pedophilia and those types of conditions are their sexual orientations.
No.
Not mental conditions. And therefore, as a sexual orientation, you now start looking at that slippery slope of, is it going to be considered something that is protected? Just like the laws have changed toward homosexuality in the last 30, 40 years, if you make it a sexual orientation, now all of a sudden that's a protected class. That's somebody who is not only normalizing the behavior, but starting to obtain legal rights to be allowed to do that sort of thing. And it's frightening and disturbing to think that there are subsections of society that want to normalize that sort of behavior.
Even politicians like the failed Virginia legislative candidate Nathan Larson. Larson campaigned as an open pedophile. Larson campaigned as an open pedophile in incel, advocating misogyny, child sex, incest, and numerous other topics, engage in and advocate for laws that allow sex with minors. He ran several websites for open pedophiles and was quoted on one saying, "Why doesn't every pedo just focus on making money so they can have a pedo wife and then either impregnate her with some fuck toys or adopt some fuck toys?" There's no way this episode's getting monetized. So I will put this up on Rumble. Larson, after a failed 2018 attempt at a congressional seat in Virginia, was later arrested for exploiting, enticing, and kidnapping a 12-year-old from California and transporting her across state lines to become his child bride. Why? I think that the laws for gay people should have been changed and they should have had rights the whole time. I don't give a flying fuck if you're transgender as an adult. I don't give a shit about that. Why are we touching children?
And it's one of those things that I've never been able to figure out where that is, why that is. Who looks at a prepubescent child and says, "That's great"? The ones that go after infants and toddlers. It's a mental condition that needs to be addressed as a mental condition, and more so as one of those kinds of conditions that can't be fixed.
I agree.
They can't be solved. They can't be, treated. And if they have that true pedophilia or true hebephilia, that true, desire for children, they're not safe to be in society.
Ever.
And physical castration doesn't work. The chemical castration doesn't work. None of that stuff will
Change
fix
the mental
that.
side.
Right.
That's one of these things. I do believe in criminal justice reform. I do believe in taking the worst of society, giving them purpose, getting them a new life after they've served their term, re-entering society and going out into public. I 100% back that, except for one crime. Don't touch children.
Right.
That's it. You had also talked about, too, one of the things that actually fascinated me is you had said that this is all, by the way, the first 30 pages of his book, like legit. But you offer a lot, you lay a good foundation. You lay a really, really good foundation. And you talk about the fact that, that some of these people would in fact have no problem, having a relationship with an adult, but the child just so happened to be a crime of opportunity, essentially.
Right.
And impulse control. And that's one of the things that it's like, we all have impulse control. But at the same time, like, that's not what my impulse is for. My question is out of the offenders that you arrested, you said you worked over 8,400 cases. How many of those that you can think of, obviously I don't need a specific number here, but how many of those were preyed upon as children themselves?
I know that some of them used that as an excuse.
Okay.
And I heard that as an excuse probably 40 to 50% of the time.
Okay.
I have no way to corroborate that. I have no way to know whether or not there actually was victimization there or not. There are a number of studies out there that have looked at victimization and have talked to victims and, followed them later on. The overwhelming majority of victims that have been studied do not go on to victimize other people.
Okay.
More often than not, what you see is they get into some of the advocacy programs and things like that because they know that's what happened to them. They know how horrific it was. They don't want that to happen to somebody else. Is there a subset that probably get broken in some way and the behavior gets normalized? Yeah. But to say that all of the offenders are victims, first it makes the actual victimization that's going on seem less bad. And I think it gives them an excuse that they don't need to have, because at the end of the day, regardless of what happens to us in our past, we have the choice to be able to act or not act on that. And I know people who were victimized as children and never do anything. They make that logical choice of, I didn't want that to happen to me. I don't want that to happen to somebody else.
That's one of their motivators is to not victimize other people.
Right.
Yeah, they go one of two ways apparently. So it's so fucking gross. And it's a subset of law enforcement that is not talked about enough. Does your guys' do you get mental health support? Let me back up. I know that for the FBI, when I was trained by them, that they had stated that it's the only place where if you walk in tomorrow and say, I can't do this anymore, they're like, okay, you're done. Right. But they also gave them obviously the FBI has the money for everything.
Right.
But
when I was with the task force, about a year after I was on the task force, they sent me to Quantico and I got to go see a shrink and I got to talk about it and stuff like that. And there was access to mental health throughout. And fortunately, our commander was very big into the mental health, and he tried to make sure that we had programs available, that we had access to different programs, things like that. Once I came back to county, that availability was gone.
Because of funding.
Because of funding.
Yeah.
And while I tried to push it internally within the agency, it has been slow to change. It is changing. Nationally as well as within our organization, there is a better recognition of PTSD in law enforcement in general, but especially within these kinds of units where you're seeing that. It's not changing fast enough, in my opinion, but it's getting there. And there's a lot more resources now than there were 10, 15 years ago.
And this is a particular subset of trauma as well.
Right.
This is not your typical dead body. I say typical, but that's just the cop talk. The typical dead bodies and I have shut my damn notifications off. I don't know why it keeps ringing. I'm sorry. This is not your typical dead bodies and your death scenes and no. This is something that hits to the core of who you are as a human being.
Right.
And this requires I've had Travis Gribble on. I don't know if you're familiar with who he is, but he's a former Mesa PD. He's huge into advocacy for PTSD and all that good stuff, travels around the country. And yeah, you have to have culturally competent, therapists that understand that. But now you got to layer on the sexual exploitation and the sexual assault and all that type of stuff onto it. And I can't imagine there's a ton of therapists that are just raring to work with first responders that deal with this.
And I've been working with a therapist for about 4 years now. Because I started seeing her right as the world ended with COVID. And it has been difficult because I don't want to I don't want to traumatize her by going into the details of things when she's not that's not her thing. And she specializes in law enforcement. She deals with almost exclusively first responders. She comes from a first responder family, so she gets it.
Is it Jennifer?
No.
Okay.
She gets it. She understands.
Gotcha.
But at the same time, you can't go into the details. And the book was actually very cathartic to me because I was able to get a lot of that out. I didn't put the significance of the details or the amount of the details that I probably could have, but I didn't want to hurt people who were reading it.
I'll be completely honest with you. Like I said, I've been open and admitted first and foremost, thank you very much for admitting the fact that you see a therapist.
Oh yeah.
Legitimately, that wouldn't have happened 20 years ago.
No.
It would not have happened. So thank you very much for admitting that. Secondly, dealing with my own trauma and PTSD from the job, reading it I had to put the book down several times. Like, okay, all right, just think about something else for a little bit. But yeah, no, even not going into extreme depth, it's still disgusting, gross things, unfortunately, but it has to be talked about. It has to be brought to light.
Right.
So, but again, thank you very much for admitting that, because we're of an age now where, like, I'm so tired of cops killing themselves.
Yes.
I'm so tired of the suicide. I'm really over the command staff not giving a shit.
Right.
And I'm not talking about your command staff. I'm not talking about your department in any way, shape, or form.
Just in general,
Yes.
you see a lot of the old guard, and they tend to be the ones up at the top that don't want to recognize that. And I think if they would start to recognize it, especially at the early phases, they need to be going in and talking about mental health in the academies.
Amen.
They need to be doing, follow up with officers and deputies every time they're at a critical incident. And I know that the excuse is always, well, we don't have the time to do this. We got to get back out there and take the calls. We don't have enough manpower, da 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 da. But you're doing a disservice, not just to that officer, but to the entire agency and to the entire community, if you're putting somebody back out there that's broken.
Yep.
And we see the suicide rate is 3 times higher than those officers killed in the line of duty feloniously. We know that it is an impact to everybody, and it impacts how we do the job.
Amen.
I knew when I hit my 20, I'd been doing, child crimes for 10 years at that point. There was no way I could go back to the road. There was no way I could go back to running calls and dealing with, property line disputes and barking dogs and all of that piddly stuff, because I know, especially where my mind was at that particular time, I'd have gone off on somebody. I'd have absolutely just tore into somebody the first time I had to deal with some petty little BS, whatever, that they're blowing up into some major incident. And that, I think that's why we see so many of these videos of cops going out and being assholes and getting on people and jumping on them and beating the piss out of them for absolutely no reason. And I don't know the whole situation. I saw the video, but I haven't read into it. The officer that took the 71-year-old Asian guy and body slammed him to the ground and all of that. Odds are that dude's got some trauma that he needs to deal with, and he's got some other issues going on, and it was not that scene that was the problem, and he's probably not even that bad a guy, maybe, I don't know, but my guess is he'd just come from a child death, or he was dealing with trauma from a prior fatal accident, or he was dealing with, he had some trauma. We all do. You can't do this job for more than 2 weeks without collecting trauma that normal people don't know, don't see. They say the average person deals with 1 to 2 traumatic incidents in their entire life. Like, we call that day shift.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a Tuesday. So if we don't start recognizing that and doing things to take steps to help the guys, and I say guys as a general term, not guys and gals, you're shooting yourself in the foot, and you're putting these people out there and setting them up to fail.
You're going to have better outcomes with uses of force. You're going to have better outcomes on investigations. You're going to have better outcomes with dealing with the public, strictly by making that law enforcement officer as good as they can possibly be.
Right, absolutely. And you're going to be better, have a better chance of having that officer for their full career, instead of having them burn out 5, 10, 15 years in, and now they're broken and have to go find something else, or they're alcoholics and they can't do it, or, whatever.
The consumption of alcohol is it's so rampant in law enforcement, and particularly when I was in it. I've only been out for a few years, but it was the coping mechanism.
Mm-hmm.
It was cultural. It was the coping mechanism. If we had squad parties, everybody was drinking and all that type of stuff. And there is not one thing that alcohol helps with. There's not one thing that alcohol helps with.
Right.
And obviously I don't use alcohol anymore. I use something else. So hence the green part of blue to green. But that's this is a totally off topic conversation. I want to get back to you and this stuff. But the trauma to talk about is so important. It's so crucial for command staff to start having the conversation, just like you said in the very academy. You absolutely nailed it, is that you're going to have just better outcomes.
And, and I even talk about it in the book when I say, there were periods where the flashbacks and the trauma from doing this was so bad that I was drinking myself to sleep every night. Not the right coping mechanism. I get it. But when I went home and I had viewed hundreds of thousands of images that day, and every time I blink my eyes, it's like a projector flashing to the next image, and I'm trying to go to sleep and I can't close my eyes because all it does is replay everything that I've watched through that day. I was having to drink myself to blackout because I couldn't close my eyes any other way. And it's not uncommon. And that's the sad thing. And if I had followed the advice that I was given to have better coping mechanisms, I probably wouldn't have gotten to that. But I was still part of the old mindset of, I got this. I'm fine. I can do this. No problem. I'm tough. I don't want to go tell my command staff that I'm having this problem, because they're going to take my gun and they're going to put me on a desk, and I'm going to, they're going to give me a fitness for duty. And what happens to my pension? What happens to my paycheck? What happens to my family? All of those things go through your mind. And so you just suck it up and I'm fine. I'm fine. I'm fine. Yeah, we aren't.
You're not fine.
No,
you're not fine. And that's one of the things where I've spoken openly about my past trauma and my alcohol usage, and I've spoken openly about the fact that that's absolutely what led to my demise in law enforcement. It was my relationship to alcohol, and that was my coping mechanism.
Right.
Instead of doing the healthy shit. And again, in full transparency, 20 years ago, they spoke about this much: eat right, work out, love your wife, love your family, and get home safe.
Right.
That was it.
Wear your vest, wear your seatbelt.
Yep.
You're good.
Below 100.
Yeah.
Remember that? Remember that keep it under 100 deaths a year, keep it under 100 miles an hour, wear your seatbelt, wear your vest. That was it.
Yeah.
That was the plan. And speaking directly, like I'm emoting a little bit of my own trauma right now. One of the issues that I had with my previous department was over a decade. I had over 11 years on the department. I had exactly 0 debriefings for traumatic events. So that's the norm.
Yeah. And I was fortunate that when I first came on, we had one captain in the department that believed in debriefs, believed in, critical incident, stress management, all of that stuff. And so my very first, I shouldn't say that. One of my first critical incidents that was significantly traumatic. After the scene was secure, after, it was done, my sergeant said, go back to the office, knock out your paper, go home. I was like, I got like 8 hours left on my shift. He goes, nope, go home. And the next day, the captain called me and said, hey, let's talk. We're going to do a debrief. We're going to see how you're doing. And I think that helped a lot to have some recognition that, yeah, this scene sucked.
Yeah.
And it was traumatic. I had to do CPR on a 3-year-old for almost 30 minutes, waiting for fire to get there. My son was only 3 months old at the time. I'm a brand new dad, and here I'm doing CPR on a dead 3-year-old kid. And so it was one of those things where it was like just the recognition that somebody thought that was traumatic and wanted to check up and make sure I was okay, I think helped not go down the path faster than I did.
Yeah. But I'm glad you found your way out. And I also do believe that talking about it is also a part of helping.
Absolutely.
It's one of these things where you're not going to have these conversations. Unfortunately, we have the dark sense of humor and have inappropriate conversations with the wrong people, and they're like,
Yes.
"What is wrong with that person?" But then when you're actually able to release them and have conversations, that's why the fire department has such a much better culture. They can go home at the end of their shift and talk.
Right.
You know, they can go home or go back to the firehouse, and when the captain tucks them in and reads them the little book, I'm friends with a bunch of firefighters too. So, but they can have that debrief, and cops don't have that. They got the next call.
Right.
And then they got the next call. Then they got the next call.
And then they've got okay, now it's time to go home, and I've got to deal with the wife and the kids and the broken truck and the whatever else, and it never ends. And it was funny because my therapist had told me for years, you need to journal. You need to journal. I'm not a Dear Diary kind of guy. But once I started writing the book and started, getting all of that out, it was so cathartic. And it was funny because my wife knew what I did, sort of.
Sure.
She knew the basics. It wasn't until she read the book just before I published it that she understood, and that she kind of got it, why I was such an asshole for so many years, why I was so fucked up for so many years, why I was coming home and just like done with everything for so many years. And she kind of got it then.
Yeah.
And again, I tried to keep it pretty PG 13-ish, because I didn't want to traumatize anybody.
Right.
But it helped me to get a lot of that out and to be able to get it out. And every time I have a conversation with anybody now about what I did, its impact, I always say, it hurt. It messed me up, but I'm better now. I'm not good. I'm better. And I'm moving that direction. And every time I can talk about it, it's a little bit more off my plate.
No, I understand it. It's like it's so incredible. It's really, really in stuff. Okay, question about all this stuff that's on the internet. You had worked. You had stated in your book that you didn't even go down the dark web.
Right.
You stayed on the regular old internet web that I access, that everybody Googles and all that type of stuff, because this stuff is so ubiquitous and it's just freaking. It could be anywhere and it could be anyone.
Yep.
So where are some things that like this stuff happens? You always hear about on the internet, but where does this stuff particularly happen?
Anywhere that a kid is on that site or on that social media platform, you're going to find a predator.
Okay.
I found him on Instagram. I found him on Facebook. I found him on Snapchat. I found him on Whisper. I found him on Kick.
Whisper. I remember that one. That one was terrible.
Yeah. I went on to web pages that were chat boards that were designed for kids. And it said right there in the rules, this is for 13 to 16-year-olds only. And we have moderators that are looking. And if you're not between the ages of 13, 16, get the heck out of here. And within 5 minutes, I could have a 40-year-old guy hitting on me. Didn't matter. We've seen him on, back in the day when there was a Club Penguin, we saw him on Club Penguin.
Oh, I don't even know what that is.
It was a video game where, young kids got on and they could play, and they were a little penguin and they got to interact with other penguins and stuff like that. Roblox, they're all over Roblox.
I've been hearing that.
They're all over Fortnite. They're all over, if there's kids on there, you're going to find offenders going and finding them. And so for parents to say, well, I don't let my kid on this website because it's bad. Whatever you're letting them on, they're on there.
They're on there.
So at one point in time, I had met a number of investigators from around the country, and we all had our undercover Facebook pages.
Okay.
That we used to be able to communicate and stuff. And we thought it would be fun to create a high school group.
Okay. Interesting.
Of all of our undercover personas, and then we could chat back and forth. We could, send suspects. If we found a suspect in their AOR, they would be able to go after them, and likewise, they could send us stuff. And at one point, I even got invited. There was one of the creeps online had created his own webpage or his own Facebook group that was other offenders that he had met. And he would specifically try and target kids and bring them to his group of other offenders. And he liked my persona so much that he made me an administrator. So I got to go in there and decide who was allowed in the group and who wasn't. So all the creepy guys get in. None of the actual kids get in. And the only kids that got in were the ones that I knew were UCs, so that we could work the group and we could try and take as many of them off. But this was on Facebook. This was open Facebook. The only thing that was closed was the group was a closed group. You had to ask permission to get in.
Why is it that when I'm gonna broadcast this out and I'm gonna put it out on Facebook and Instagram and all that, and I'm gonna show little clips, and when we're talking about this, the little part where we say the word pedophile or sexual exploitation or whatever the buzzword is, it's going to be bleeped out, or it's going to be whatever, and it's going to be scrubbed out. And if I don't scrub it out, then my account's going to get shadow banned and all that type of stuff. Why can't they do that and find all the damn people that are doing this stuff online and shut those people down?
My opinion, they don't want to. Because here's the thing. When one of our profiles was discovered by a defense attorney, and the defense attorney contacted Facebook, Facebook shut down all of our UC profiles, said it was a violation of the terms of conditions. And when we contacted Facebook and said, look, here's who we are, we'll show you our credentials, here's what we're doing, we're actively taking bad people off of your profile or off of your platform. We're actively taking people off of the platform to make the rest of the people on your platform safer. They said, nope, violates our terms and conditions. We went all the way to Zuckerberg. And we were told, nope, violates terms and conditions. We don't want any fake accounts out there. And we got shut down. And, at the risk of sounding like I need a tinfoil hat or that, anything like that, I honestly believe that there are certain people within those organizations that contribute to it, because we know that Instagram had tons of it. And even though they've profiled it and put it in the media and everything else, Instagram still isn't doing much about it. And Instagram is part of Meta, which is part of which owns Facebook. They're actively putting additional, what they call safety conditions on Facebook. So now, like, Facebook Messenger is all end-to-end encrypted.
Okay. That makes it even harder.
That makes it even harder from an investigative standpoint. Right. It makes it even harder to find any evidence that we need. They say it's to make it safer for the people on the platform, but the only people who really need end-to-end encryption are the ones who are saying things that they don't want found out.
You should not be sending top secret information across Facebook.
Right.
You don't need end-to-end encryption on Facebook.
Unless you're a Clinton, you don't need to do that.
Yeah, this one's going nowhere. We're done. Yeah, no, we're fucking done. But that's the problem. Is like I do understand privacy now. When I was in law enforcement, I was very, if I'm not doing anything wrong, it shouldn't matter. But now as a private citizen, I'm like, no, fuck that. I don't want the government looking at me. I don't want the government spying on me.
Agreed.
But at the same time, law enforcement needs to conduct its investigations. This is my take. This is a purely opinion right now. I think that the problem is that we've had so many bad apples in law enforcement hurt the public trust, that we can't take it just at their word that, they're just doing it for these purposes.
Right.
There's always the nefarious, like, they're out to get me, they're out to do this, they're out to do that. The cops are trying to get me. Unfortunately, it's happened.
Right.
So it's eroded the public trust in those regards. But at the same time, how do you bridge the gap between, conducting an investigation and not trampling on people's rights?
And you kind of have to hope that the checks and balances that are in place, the Fourth Amendment, you have to go get a search warrant. It has to be signed by a judge. It has to be, spelled out in particularity. All of those things that were intended to be the checks and balances. You hope those are still working.
Yeah.
Can people get around them? Can cops get search warrants with false information and all of those things? Yes, absolutely. But I think for the most part, what we're finding is that we still need that ability to go after the bad guys, despite the fact that other people have ruined it. And yes, people have ruined the chokehold, and we can't use the chokehold anymore. Right. Blah blah blah. There's still checks and balances outside of the legislative branch that, or the executive branch, that need to be considered. And I'm the same with you. I don't want the government knowing what I do. I don't want them reading through my text messages or being able to access my phone willy-nilly. But if they think that there was a crime committed and there's a warrant and there's a judge has signed off on it, then odds are I probably did something wrong.
Right. The issue that I have is this, is that you hear about these judges, and I'm just giving a generalization that it's mostly back east, that you hear that officer so-and-so got this search warrant under false pretenses, and then the judge signed off. And I understand you can lie, and then the judge only has to go off of what they do.
Right.
But there have been so many times where I've read a case study, and the search warrant, the probable cause statement is junk, and the judge still signed off on that. Whereas I remember it's for a serious crime, and that's for a very serious crime. Whereas when I had a DUI, if I sent it up to we had the electronic system where I could send it. If I didn't have the right word in there, the judge would be saying, calling me and double checking. It's like, why isn't that checks and balances happening on that end to make sure that everything is proper so that it's not abused, so that the good guys can go get the bad guys, and then we can, stop the cycle of crime. That's totally off topic. And
I've had judges. Yeah. I've had judges that have dinged me because the punctuation wasn't quite right. And it changed the way that they interpreted the sentence. And I had to go and fix, and I get it. Punctuation's important. I get it. But you're right. Why are there other judges that are allowing search warrants without probable cause or without sufficient probable cause? And again, go after that one person.
Yes.
Don't kill it for the entire, 800,000 cops that are out there trying to do a good job every day because you got one that's being a knucklehead. Yeah.
And that's, unfortunately, that's the only part that gets, so this was a total side tangent. That's the part that just gets perpetuated in the news cycle, is that one officer. And it's like, okay, yeah, that person's shitty and should be fired and probably prosecuted.
Right.
But at the same time, there's, like you said, the other 800,000, the 799,999 that are doing the job for the right reasons.
Right.
That's always the message I try to send, is like, yeah, we need to talk about the bad, but you missed the out of the one bad, you missed the under 100 that are doing a good job.
Yeah, because those aren't hitting the news. Right. You don't see John Hook come on the news at 5:00 and go, and today, the tens of thousands of officers in the Phoenix Valley did a great job, and they stopped this many criminals, and they did all of this good stuff. No, you hear about the one asshole that screwed up.
But at the same time, again, I'm applauding you and I'm thanking you, and I'm being very serious when I say this, is that cops are not coming on and talking about their experiences. Now, I have invited and I have asked, and that's, again, another topic, but you coming down and sitting here and explaining these situations about the realities of what you're facing and what it is you're prosecuting, this is going to resonate with people. This is going to resonate, and they're going to be like, oh shit, this stuff's real. It's not in movies. This stuff is happening. It's your friends, it's your neighbors, it's your aunts, it's your uncles, it's the people around you, it's the children.
Right.
It's happening at these. And again, you coming on and talking about this stuff, this is what opens the dialogue and opens people's eyes.
And that's what we need. We need people to have those conversations. And I remember growing up, they said, don't talk about politics and don't talk about religion. No, we need to talk about politics and religion. We just need to know how to have that conversation in an appropriate fashion and not cause it to blow up.
Yeah.
And to go back to, it's not in the movies. When Sound of Freedom came out, did you see Sound of Freedom?
I didn't. I kept hearing about it, and I didn't.
So here's what I'll say to Sound of Freedom. I liked the fact that it started some conversations about human trafficking. The problem that I had with it was that it was specific to that investigator's single situation that was international, and not to take away from his experiences at all, but that was a situation that is not entirely accurate to what is happening in the U.S. today. Because what we're seeing in the U.S. today, much more prevalently than the snatch and grab type of abduction and trafficking that was shown in that movie, is the online.
Yeah.
It's the predators going online. They become the boyfriend of the girl. They trick them out of the house, or they entice them out, or they extort them out, and then they're being trafficked. And I think we need to have another movie. We need to have another awakening to people of what's happening here? What's happening online? What's happening to the kids in the U.S. to really help drive it home and to start those conversations again about human trafficking is the highest money-making scheme out of everything, with the exception of, I believe it was firearms.
Okay.
The unlawful sale of firearms. It's more than drugs. It's more than anything else. And these drug dealers and these cartels are recognizing that, because you can sell a bag of weed once. You can sell a bag of meth once. You can sell a kid 10, 15, 20 times a day.
This ties directly into human trafficking and the border and all of that stuff. And you're right. It's not the little girl walking down the street licking an ice cream cone and a white van comes up and snatches her. Right. It's not. Does it happen? Sure. But actually, it happens less than people think.
Oh, absolutely.
It happens. But again, there was a story one time, and then it just gets perpetuated. So let's talk about what's happening on the human trafficking and the sex trafficking front and the border, and what you guys are seeing or dealing with and have dealt with.
What we're seeing is that the smugglers are able to get kids across. They're able to then disappear that kid, and they're all over the place. They're being trafficked all over the country. And we're finding that it's not just the traffickers that are coming up from the border, although those are easy because Biden has let everything be wide open. And so there is no accountability. There is no, tracking. There is no anything else for any of these kids. And I think the number that I saw recently was 250,000 kids are missing that have come across the border that nobody knows where they went or where they're supposed to be. But we're also seeing this online. We're also seeing domestically kids being trafficked. And it happens here in Pinal County. I'm aware of a particular victim here in Pinal County that met Mr. Right Now online, and he talked a good game, and then he eventually got her to, come out, and then he goes, I need you to help me make some money. I need you to help me do this. And the next thing you know, he's pimping her out.
As you say, he turns into a pimp.
Yeah. And he takes her to Las Vegas. He takes her to California. He takes her all over the place. And the mom was absolutely beside herself trying to find her kid. And when she finally was able to, law enforcement was finally able to recover the child and bring her back, this girl was so brainwashed because of what this guy had said, both online and in person, that she started trying to go out and pimp herself out again to help him. And it was the amount of that's going on is significantly higher than what we're seeing with the snatch and grabs and stuff like that. And bringing over I hate to put it this way, but this is how the traffickers are going to call it, bringing the product up from other countries is only making it that much worse.
It's importing. It's bringing sand to the beach.
Absolutely.
So in a situation like that, and again, we're talking generalities here, what is the linchpin that's causing this? Is it a lack of structure in the home that the child is open to? I mean, it doesn't matter whether you're talking a terrorist. It doesn't matter whether you're talking Al-Qaeda. It doesn't matter whether you're talking a gang. It doesn't matter whether you're talking a pimp and prostitute situation. There's a sense of wanting in community.
Right.
You know what I mean? We all want to belong to something. Unfortunately, they just go and blow themselves up, and they go and kill other people, and they get prostituted out, or you join law enforcement.
Right.
We all want some sort of belonging, and it's always been my kind of experience that they're looking for something in situations when you have children. Like now, taking away the youngest who don't really understand what's going on, like in the Roblox or the Minecraft or stuff like that. When you're talking your tweens, stuff like that. Like, what's the common theme that you see in the kids themselves? What I'm asking, I guess I should say, is what are some telltale signs that, not necessarily telltale, but what are some signs and symptoms that a person could look for and recognize, like that child's at risk?
The sad thing is there's not anything.
Okay.
And
that sucks. I knew that was going to be the answer.
Yeah. And what it comes down to is every kid has a hook. Sure. Every kid has something that they're looking for. And these guys are really good at figuring it out. they look at that kid and they go, okay, if this is one of these kids that has lots of self-esteem and they're putting pictures of themselves out all the time and they're doing all of this, showing how great they are and this and that and the other, their hook is they like that attention. They want that attention. So that guy's going to go in and he's going to give them more attention. And he's going to build on that attention to try and get them to think, hey, this is my friend, this is my boyfriend, this is my whatever, and he pays the attention to me that I really want, and he's giving me all of that. If it's one of those kids that doesn't put a lot of stuff out there, seems a little bit more introverted, seems a little bit more quiet, they're going to play on that, and they're going to go in, and these pimps know the psychology. These are some of the best psychologists in the world without any training whatsoever, because they can look at somebody and they can find out this is what that person needs to get hooked in. And once they've got them hooked in, they can do anything. And, you know, the little girl that was in my neighborhood, she was a normal girl. She was a normal kid, normal teenager, did normal teenage stuff. She was in sports. She was, you know, she didn't come from a broken home. She didn't come from an abusive house. She didn't come from, you know, a socioeconomically depressed area. She had dad in the home. Everything that you would think would be a normal indicator that this is a high-risk kid. She wasn't a high-risk kid. She was a kid that got duped by somebody who was older and knew how to play on her emotions, knew how to play on her mind, knew how to play on her, you know, personality. And then once he got that hook set, it was, he switched to 180, and now all of a sudden he's the most evil person in the world, because he's playing on that and he's scaring the hell out of her, and he's playing on the fact that she is a good kid and doesn't want to get in trouble. She is well thought of in her school. She doesn't want the principal knowing she's doing this. She is well thought of in her school, in her church community and everything else, and was able to capitalize on all of that and abuse her for months.
And you nailed it. These are amazing psychologists, and they're master manipulators. Everybody knows a narcissist. Everybody knows somebody that's all about themselves. Everybody knows someone like that, and or have been in relationships with people that twist and manipulate and gaslight and everything. And that's how they build and prey upon. They just,
Right. And, you know, I get asked that a lot when I'm doing presentations at schools and for parents and stuff like that. Well, you know, how do I protect my kid? Get them off the internet.
Yeah.
And if you can't get them off the internet, because unfortunately that's kind of where society is today, monitor what they do. I had a case where a little girl had sent, you know, a inappropriate picture to Mr. Right Now. And of course, high school, you know, relationships, Mr. Right Now only lasted for about a week.
Right.
And Mr. Right Now's new girlfriend, after they break up, finds the picture on his phone and decides to mean girl it and blast it out to the school. Well, kids being kids, it started out at one school, then it moved to the neighboring school, then it moved. The next thing you know, it's at every school in Santan, Queen Creek. Then it's, I stopped tracing it at Marcos Deniza in Tempe because I couldn't keep following it.
You had enough.
Yeah. But I went to one of the mean girls' houses and I was talking to her mother, and she was a bit indignant at the fact that I was there, and my kid would never do that. She's such a horrible kid for taking that picture in the first place, and you know, yes, it's horrible that it got sent out, but you know, she shouldn't do that. And I said, do you know what your daughter's doing on her phone? Do you know if your daughter's participating in any of this? She goes, oh no, that would be an invasion of her privacy. Her daughter's 13, 14. I said, well, do you mind if I invade your daughter's privacy for a minute? Because I need to see if she still has this other girl's picture on her phone where she blasted it out so that I can, you know, figure this out. Okay, go ahead. So I look in the daughter's phone. This girl, the mean girl, the one who would never do that.
Little Miss Princess.
She had pictures on there that would make a gynecologist blush, and had been blasting this out to some boyfriend in Idaho, Iowa, one of those other, you know, Midwestern states. And I mean, she had much more detailed and prolific photographs than my victim did. And as soon as I found him, I turned it to the mom and I said, see, that's why you invade your child's privacy.
Right.
This is a cell phone that gets onto the internet and goes worldwide. There should be no privacy on this for a child.
Amen. Amen. Be a parent, not a friend.
Yep. And that's where we're finding the most problems is the parents that don't monitor their kids. They don't want to invade their privacy. They don't want to go on and do this stuff, or they are ignorant on how to do it.
Sure.
And
That's understandable, unfortunately.
absolutely. My kids figure out how to do stuff on my iPad that I haven't figured out, and I think I'm pretty good at it. But all of a sudden they're doing, I'm like, show me that. Parents need to just be more involved, And I say that as a Gen X who,
Right.
was a latchkey kid, and
Right.
my parents kicked me out at daybreak, and I was told to come home at when the street lights came on, and those of us that didn't ended up on Unsolved Mysteries, like isn't God intended, But
Natural selection happened at its finest.
exactly. And we drank from the hose, and we did stupid
Absolutely.
stuff, and thank God there were no videos
Amen.
of any of that. Nobody's phone did anything. But parents really need to become more involved because the stranger danger talk that we got growing up doesn't work.
Right.
And it's not the reality. And they really need to teach the stranger danger of the internet, which is if you don't know this person, if you bumped into them at the grocery store, you don't know this person. If this ugly mug could successfully be a 13-year-old girl for years, you don't know who you're talking to.
You don't know who you're talking to.
And parents just need to be more cognizant of that.
Why has there been more sexualization in our culture? Like, I'm not asking you to solve the world's counterculture issues right now, or culture issues, but like, why has there just been so much more sexualization? And I don't mean in advertisements and in big companies and putting, hot chicks and, studs on there. I'm talking about just in general. Like, it's just more sexualized.
And I think part of that is because of the advertising, because it's become so prevalent in television and radio and print media and everything else. And everybody now looks at this and goes, I want to look like that. I want to be like that. And the way to be like that is to emulate that.
Yeah.
And when you get people making heroes out of Kardashians,
Yeah. Valid point.
we know how they got famous.
Yep.
People see that. The other problem is the monetization that's behind that is
Valid
so
point.
huge. If you think about it, you know how many kids nowadays are looking at OnlyFans as a viable and almost preferential source of income over going and flipping burgers at the McDonald's for $10, $12 an hour, $14 an hour?
Yeah, it's $14 an hour.
I know.
now.
It's
$14.50.
the kids flipping burgers are making more than I made when I became a cop 20 years ago. But if they know that they can go on, and my daughter jokes about this all the time, and God, she's just joking, or I'm going to do things that I'm not going to mention right here because it would be premeditation. But she laughs about, I'm just going to start taking pictures of my feet and putting those online because, there's some creep out there that fetishizes feet, and I could monetize that.
Yeah.
And it's like, I know that's how frightening that is, that these girls think that, well, it's just pictures. Who cares?
Have you seen a new thing called Weird Wealth?
No.
Yeah, I've literally seen this advertised on Instagram.
Okay.
I doom scroll. I doom scroll. I watch reels. I watch YouTube shorts. Yeah, there's a new thing called Weird Wealth where you can sign up on it. And there's this girl that says, some dude literally just wanted me to wear my socks and write his name on them and send them. And he sent me $100.
And yes, there are those people out there. I dealt with them online.
That was the weird kinky stuff, I'm sure.
But the fact that they're now advertising it and teaching people how to monetize that is disturbing. Wow.
There's always, that was, and it's a direct exploitation of somebody. Go do
absolutely.
this and I'll pay you money.
Yeah.
That's all it is. No matter how weird it is. Like I didn't make a username yet. So no, just kidding. I mean, $100 is $100.
Hey,
But it's so fast and easy to just be able to Venmo or Cash App somebody, money for whatever the case is. The next thing you know, get what you want.
And to all the viewers out there, if you'd like a pair of my socks, I do take Venmo.
We'll list his username at the bottom here.
I've got socks to spare, and I'll buy more. I don't care.
Right?
Yeah, that's wow. That's I knew that there was those fetish sites out there for that kind of stuff.
Sure.
You just don't think that it would then start hitting popular social media to be advertised like that. And I shouldn't be surprised by it because God knows some of the things that I've seen. I shouldn't be surprised by anything anymore.
Right.
But when you start seeing it put in that fashion, it's a little bit more disturbing.
Yeah, it's no different than doing Uber Eats now.
Yeah.
Or, door dashing.
Well, and I always have to joke at it's probably a meme or something like that said, when we were growing up, we were told not to get in cars with strangers and not to talk to strangers. And now we have an app for getting in cars with strangers. Several of them. It's
we've broken all the rules.
Oh, all of them. So, yeah. And again, I shouldn't be surprised by stuff that's coming out.
Right.
Some of the weirdest stuff that I came across, I had to look up some of the terms to figure out what it was. And when I talk about them, people think it's not real. And that was part of the reason for the book was, I came across some stuff that when I got back to the office and I told people, yeah, this guy's a brony. He's not just a brony. He's a pre-op transsexual demi-pansexual brony. And people are like, huh?
What?
Yeah. No, I had to look some of that up. But this is how he.
What's a brony?
Okay, so
I didn't get to that part.
So a brony is an adult male who has a addiction to My Little Pony.
Okay.
So they create a persona around My Little Pony. They have the cutie marks, they have the pony name, they have the everything else. Just like any 6-year-old girl who likes My Little Pony, this is an adult male. Now, this particular adult male was a pre-op transsexual, so he was transitioning or was...
Born male?
Born male, wanted to be referred to by female pronouns, was intending to potentially transition, things like that. He was... it was also a pansexual.
I don't know what that means.
I thought it had to do with like silverware and kitchen implements. No, pansexual is somebody who can only become sexually involved with an individual if they have a very intellectual attraction to them. They have to be, there has to be a connection. There's no one night stands. There's no any of that kind of thing.
Well, and that actually doesn't sound like a terrible thing. But.
Not horrible, but apparently there's now a term for it, and it only applies to certain people. I don't know. And then he was also a demisexual, and I have to remember because it's been a minute. I want to say the demisexual was something along the lines of didn't matter if the attraction was male, female, animal, vegetable, mineral. If there was an attraction, it was an attraction, but there was no judgments. Just saying. It didn't matter, who it was to. If that attraction was there, it was there.
All right. So we can't just use terms like bi anymore?
Well, that would imply that there's only 2, and apparently there's 157. So I'm not sure what that.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Like I said, this podcast is going nowhere, by the way. So like I said, it's going to get I'm going to do my best, but
it's going to be edited down to like 10 seconds. Hey, welcome to the Blue and Green, and thanks for listening. We'll see you on the next one.
Never seen there's real quick. There's a video of we're going to put Blazing Saddles, the TV edition on it. It opens up, it says Blazing Saddles, then it rolls to credits. Yep. It's like, that's all we got, folks.
Anything else is going to offend everybody.
Yeah. So he's a demisexual, pansexual, pre-op trans
brony,
and for everybody listening, we're Gen X. I'm not up to speed on this stuff. I'm not trying to offend anybody or anything like that. I don't care what you are. Don't touch children.
Right.
Don't care what you are.
Yeah.
So I'm not trying to be offensive in any way, shape, or form or laugh at anybody. I just don't get it.
Yeah.
I legitimately don't get it and don't understand it.
And it's hard to wrap your head around some of this stuff. And for me talking to this person, because I'm trying not to be offensive. I don't want to use the wrong pronoun, but I'm not even sure which adjective is now a pronoun. And I'm trying to figure this out.
Sorry.
It's where we're coming to. The English
I don't even know which adjective is a pronoun. Okay, all right.
Yeah, and so I'm trying to be respectful.
Right.
But at the same time, I'm interviewing this person because the state of Utah found its computer and found a significant amount of CSAM on the computer and asked me to go interview it to see if it would provide me detail about the images on the computer. And I got a fairly standard response. Well, I came across this stuff online and I was collecting it all so that I could turn it over to you later, and I forgot.
Like Pete Townsend.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that person eventually went to a Utah prison for a little while. But having to talk to people and go, okay, so do you know what a brony is? And everybody's like, no, let me educate you. To find out now that there's weird, whatever you called it, weird wealth.
Yeah, weird wealth. Yeah, weird wealth.
To find out that there's weird wealth out there shouldn't surprise me.
Right.
But it does.
I just, and it's one of these things where, like, I will admit that when it comes to like that part of the world, I've never personally had experiences in which I have been confused on my sexuality. So I don't know what that looks like or what that feels like.
Right.
But at the same time, don't touch children.
Right.
Don't look at children. Don't view images of children.
Right. And if everybody could just, follow that one rule. We could all be a little bit happier.
I forget the name of the gentleman that plays in The Sound of Freedom. He's also the one that played Christ in Passion. Wasn't he? No. Anyways, but I remember hearing him talk about his Christianity and his faith, and he talked about, and I think it's important because the question has always been asked, like, well, doesn't God from a Christian standpoint,
right?
Doesn't God and Jesus forgive all sins? And he said on a podcast that he was on, he was talking about his faith. He says, yeah, but there's the one that God talks about that's not forgivable.
Right.
That's it.
Yep.
Those people are not getting into heaven. I'm not a pastor. I've not been anointed by God, but I'm here to tell you that no.
I'm pretty sure that when Dante talked about the 7 levels of hell, he forgot the 8th one that's just south of Satan's outhouse that's specifically for those people, because there's no way to justify that.
I want to ask you this question so that the public hears it. I know what the answer is, but when you're out and like, what are some? I know what the answer is, but I'm going to ask you anyways. What would you consider some signs or symptoms of a potential predator?
So many of them are different based upon why they do it.
Okay.
You have your predisposed. Those are the ones who they're attracted to kids. That's their primary attraction. Those are the really dangerous ones because they can't be fixed. And so that is a totally different animal than the, I call them kind of circumstantial offenders that maybe are curious or are bored or are drunk or are whatever external factor they use to break down those inhibitions. The biggest thing that I can say, though, is if anybody is ever showing an undue amount of attention to your kids, and it crosses that border, everybody's got a sports coach or a scoutmaster or a teacher or whatever that is dedicated to their craft, and they are enthusiastic about it, and so they get a little bit zealous at times about making sure that the kids go on the camp out or do the sports or play the extra time, whatever. But there's a point at which that goes too far.
Absolutely. And
if your spidey senses as a parent tingle at the fact that he's sure acting weird, he's trying to get a whole lot of one-on-one time, he's trying to get a lot of personal attention, pay attention to that. I think a lot of parents have that innate ability to say there's something wrong here. And society wants us to not pay attention to that because we don't want to make waves. We don't want to accuse somebody inappropriately. We don't want to, you know, talk about, oh, well, that's confrontational or it's uncomfortable, whatever. Yeah, it's uncomfortable. But guess what? Finding out your kid's getting molested is a lot more uncomfortable. And I think parents need to really pay more attention to that. Other than that, it's hard to come up with a single thing of, you know, well, I knew this guy was I knew this guy was a perv because this is the way he looked, or this is the way he talked, or this is the way. And don't get me wrong, I've looked at driver's license photos and gone, yep, that's our dude. There's two people in the house. We're not sure which one it is. Nope, it's that one. They do have a look, but it's not a look that you can describe. It's a look of, yeah, there's something about that guy that is setting it off.
I do think that the law enforcement side of the house will understand this, that there absolutely, positively, 100% is a sixth sense.
Oh, absolutely.
There 100% is a spidey sense. When you start off in law enforcement and you're just doing the one-on-one interactions with, you know, traffic stops or whatever the case is, and you're starting to build that rapport, next thing you know, you find that one person, you're like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Something's really, really, really off here.
Yep.
I don't know what it is. But I remember the first time that had ever happened. But then as you start to build your skill sets and all that type of stuff, yeah, there's a reason why cops are distrusting.
Right.
There's a reason why cops only have friends with cops. You know, I definitely try to make sure that, like, you know, have other friends. But there are people that are evil.
Yeah.
There is real evil in the world.
Oh, absolutely. And I've come across them.
See, told you something. I don't know why it's doing this.
It's connected to your...
Yeah, I know, but that's wild. Oh, killing me. Sorry about that.
No worries.
I don't know why it just did that. Weird. Sorry. Yeah, there's
evil out there.
There's real evil out there.
And you got to pay attention when you come across it, because a lot of parents don't. They shake it off as, you know, not a big deal or something like that, and they need to pay closer attention.
No, the sixth sense thing is a real thing. And it's just, you have said the word he a lot. He. And I think it's very important to point out one of the statistics that you brought up in your book. And is that roughly 5% of offenders are female.
Right.
So I believe that the female offenders are just as sick and twisted as the male offenders. The problem is this: what you see in the news is the smoking hot teacher banging the 16-year-old kid.
Right. And
that's the problem. I'm not condoning that action in any way, shape, or form.
Not at all. Well, and the other problem on top of that is the reaction from most guys is, right on, dude. Good job, you know. And they don't realize that, no, that's actually really detrimental to that kid's development. It's detrimental to his mental health. And, you know, yeah, you might kind of give the thumbs up. Oh, man, you scored a hot one, you know, good on you. It can mess that kid up.
And that predator is just as sick as the males are.
Right, absolutely. And the thing that I'm seeing that is disturbing is these teachers, especially the hot female teachers, seem to be going for younger and younger kids. Did you notice that Brittany Zamora, the one up in Glendale?
Okay, yeah, that's recent.
That kid was like 13.
Yeah, I remember that.
Like, we're not talking about they're going for the high school seniors or even the high school freshmen.
Right.
They're going for middle school. And that's a whole other level of messed up in the head for her to want to go for somebody that young and to be oftentimes give up a husband and kids and everything else of their own. But then that kid is not right either after that.
It's not a good experience in any way, shape, or form.
Right.
You know what I mean? Yeah, like that's not a healthy environment in any way, shape, or form. Yeah, and again, and a lot of the times that I've heard, excuse me, I'm speaking specifically of teachers right now, those always appear to be like a long-term relationship.
And what we find with female offenders oftentimes is they are compensating for some perceived lack of intimacy within their personal relationships, things like that, and they tend to take that as a relationship and turn it into a relationship, and they make it into that because of, I hate to say because of the nurturing behavior, but to some degree they're taking that behavior and they're trying to rationalize it by making it into a relationship and saying that it's love and doing all of these things to try and normalize it a little bit, even if it's just in their own brains. Guys, because we don't typically have that same desire to be in relationships and things like that, it ends up being a lot more physical, and it's not thought of in the same way.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, no, guys, especially at that age, they're not interested in a relationship.
Right.
They just want to sow their wild oats and go on, whereas the older female can manipulate the male into loving them.
Right. And they do it as you know, part of a manipulation, but as part of a, you know, trying to find something that they perceive as missing from whatever other relationships they have.
And the problem when you're dealing with this also is when we're talking to the crowd is that, like, you have to address every age group completely differently. You have to address males and females completely differently. You have to talk to them in a way that speaks to them.
Right.
It's not just a general. And again, as you stated, the pimp, the perpetrator, the suspect is going to tailor how and what they do to that kid.
Right. And you know, and I saw it in my undercover work. I would have, if I put myself out there as a kind of nerdy kid that, you know, was looking for some kind of interaction because, you know, I intellectually I'm trying to look for this. I would have the guys start talking about the nerdy stuff, and they would, you know, try and rope me in by saying, "Oh, I love this book," or "You should read this," or "You should do that." And when I was the stereotypical, you know, high school cheerleader,
I'm not laughing. I saw pom-poms just now.
At least pom-poms and not the skirt, okay? You know, you got a totally different reaction. Yeah. And honestly, the reason that I did that was, and I used those personas, was because at that time my daughters were in cheer.
Okay.
And they were, you know, growing up in those general age groups. And so what I was trying to find specifically was, which asshole's going to possibly go after my girl, and let's get rid of them. And I could use what I was hearing from them about different types of cheer and different lifts and different da-da-da-da-da, and I could incorporate that in to make it more authentic. And so that's just kind of how that worked for me when I was doing undercover. But again, if I played on the introverted, you know, whatever, I'd have some offenders that would be turned off very quickly and they would move on.
Okay.
And then I have other offenders that would play on that.
Interesting.
And so you could see that manipulation in there.
I had that much experience in undercover work. Mm-hmm. So I'm never going to sit here and say that, but I knew immediately when I was saying the wrong things. Mm-hmm. And you could see the people like, look, is this person? Yeah. I'm assuming it probably works the same way when it came to the internet and online stuff. So they could probably sniff you out a mile away if you said the wrong thing.
So it was fairly common to have them make some comment about, "Are you sure you're not a cop?"
Okay.
You know, you have to tell me if you're a cop. You know, all of that BS. And the first time somebody said that, I made a joke about, "Oh yeah, I'm totally 21 Jump Street." I look just like Johnny Depp.
Okay.
And as soon as I typed that into the chat board, I went,
shit, not Channing Tatum.
I have to be Channing Tatum, not Johnny Depp, because Johnny Depp ages me a bit.
Yep.
And I had to be very careful when making those kinds of, especially the snide comments, because my persona was a lot like me. I'm kind of an asshole. And so my persona was part of that as well. And I had to be careful making those kinds of comments that I used the right reference, because if I start using references from when I was growing up and TV shows that I watch and things like that, my cover was blown.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, the second you said that, I as soon as you said 21 Jump Street, I thought of the 1980s one.
Yep.
That's very funny. Yeah, and then my wife said something the other day. Oh, man, she made a reference to our pop culture. Mm-hmm. And I said, they don't know who that is, babe. And
Right.
we looked at our kids and we said, do you know? They're like, no. And my son's girlfriend's like, no. I'm like, oh. Yeah, we now that they're redoing every damn thing too.
Right.
So you got to use the current pop culture references and what it is.
And after that one mistake, I was like, okay, Channing Tatum. I got to remember Channing Tatum.
Interesting. Oh man, I don't envy you having done this for so long that you did. Are you still currently doing it?
No.
Okay.
In 2021, I retired because I couldn't do it anymore.
No.
And, I thought about, okay, should I promote? Should I go to a different unit? I couldn't think of anything else that I wanted to do that would be as rewarding and satisfying. And I knew I didn't want to promote and, deal with other people's kids.
Right.
And so I retired. I'm back with the sheriff's office now in a civilian capacity so that I can continue doing some investigations, and I do pre-employment backgrounds now so that I can dig into people's lives without necessarily tripping over stuff that's going to trigger.
I think you've done your time on that end. Like, it's okay.
And sadly, there's a part of me that still has that itch. I still want to go out and do that. I still want to go out and save kids. I still want to go out and have that impact on the world, but I can't look at those images anymore. I can't go through that again. I can't put my family through that again. And so I'm having to take a step back, and I'm still trying to dabble a little bit. I'm working on some legislation right now to try and help investigators and help kids and things like that. I've put out some trainings and things. I've worked with some organizations to build some of those impacts without having to see the images and deal with it.
My kids don't understand. Well, they do now that they're older. I don't watch bloody, gory movies. I'll be completely honest with you. The very first Joker that came out, it gets up to a certain part, and then he goes to get some, I don't remember specifically, he goes to get some sort of a file, and he learns at that moment that he was the child that was molested.
Abused,
yeah.
right.
And I immediately hit stop button. I'm going, I don't want to deal with that right now.
Yeah.
That's the mental tolls of having done this job. And I did not do it to the extent that you did in any way, shape, or form.
And again, when Sound of Freedom came out, one of the first scenes in the movie, he's going through images. He had just busted a chomo, and he was going through and classifying some images and stuff like that.
That is the most appropriate term, chomo.
Yes.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah, they're not a map; they're a chomo.
They're a chomo.
And people ask me, well, is that accurate? I said, that was like watching myself on the screen, because that was me sitting at that computer, clicking through image after image after image, and the same visceral response that he had to that is absolutely accurate. You have that same gut clenching,
Being that I have not seen the movie, is this a case has to do with Sway Pak, Thailand? No. Okay.
Colombia.
Okay. Yeah. There was one of the most interesting cases that I had ever heard, and one of the most horrific cases. I went to the Dallas
Crimes Against Children's Conference.
Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah. I went to it in 2016. The Wednesday night party was a wild time, but we don't talk about that.
It's described as a spring break for cops now, and we won't say why.
The Monday and Tuesday were all business. That Wednesday, when they had the dance, it was like, whoa, okay.
Yeah.
But anyways, hearing some of the big cases and being trained by the big detectives who have done this. There is one case that I like. Again, you're looking into the depravity of humanity and the most disgusting, vile parts, and there's still something that I saw. And for those who aren't familiar, you go to the conference, and these detectives are talking about how they busted this person, and they're doing a case brief over here, and you're learning all these new things. And I was new at this learning about all this information. And then I walked into one, and I sat down and I listened to the briefing. It was two detectives out of California. Mm-hmm. And they were like, we're really sorry, but we have to do this. And they showed the images, and they showed this thing that I don't even want to discuss. And it was like, I can't put myself in that person's head why they just did that.
Right.
I can't.
So there was I was in a kick room.
Okay.
And,
The chat
the chat
thing?
app.
Okay.
And I had done an account takeover, so I had a vetted account that was in this chat room, so I could just kind of sit back and lurk. And they didn't bug me because the account had already been vetted as, one of the guys. And I'm watching all of these people in the chat room, and these chat rooms can have upwards of 50 people in them. And this one was probably pretty full. So you got 50 different individuals from all around the world, and all they do is post images back and forth and videos and things like that and trade the CSAM back and forth. And I'm sitting in there lurking because I want to see who's posting what and start identifying them as I can and start taking them off as I can. And one guy posted a video that offended the rest of the perverts in the room, and one of the administrators for the room went, "Whoa, dude, none of that. We don't have that in here. You want to post that, go someplace else. Don't post it again or you're out." And several other perverts left. So it was that egregious. And that obviously immediately was like, okay, boom, you're target number one.
Absolutely.
Guess who I'm going after now?
I'm going to need your address, and I'm going to need an airstrike here in about a minute.
Yeah. So I found him in Ohio and notified authorities in Ohio to go after him. And when they hit his house, not only did they pull him out, but as they were interviewing him, he goes, "Hey, not for nothing, but my roommate, yeah, he's into the same stuff. You might check out his computer too." And so they wrote another search warrant. They checked the roommate's computer and found that he was into the same stuff, and they got a 2-for out of it, which I thought was great.
Yeah.
That one video from that one series gave me nightmares more than any other that I had ever seen. And I had nightmares about that particular video for years. I went to the Dallas Crimes Against Children's conference one year, and there was an investigator there that had been part of the case that ultimately ended up identifying the perpetrator on that, rescuing the child, and learning about the fact that that kid was now safe. Made all the difference in the world. Learning that that perpetrator was now spending the rest of his life in a Filipino prison made all the difference in the world. And it gave me closure in a way that I was able to not have nightmares about that, anymore. Now, that's not to say that I tripped across that same video on another case several years later and went, "Well, nope, I know that one. I know that one. We're done. Turn it off. We don't need to see it." But it is still the most horrific I have ever seen out of all the millions of images that I've had to see and videos and everything else. And so it definitely, you can have that one that you go, "Oh, no, I'm done. And how people can justify in their mind doing that sort of thing.
It's like, I'm rendered speechless.
Yeah.
And again, like the amount that I was exposed to was nothing compared to, it was a small component of what I did to my other detective duties. I did the other stuff.
Right.
When a case would come to the state, to DPS, then we would get it. But the internet crimes, the ICAC, we had the ICAC people.
Yeah.
So like I said, mine was always the one-on-one stuff. But yeah, I just can't even.
And, and I'll say that the hands-on stuff was always very difficult to do.
Sure.
But 99% of the time, you knew who your suspect was. You had fairly quick closure to that case because
you're right.
You had the victim, you had the forensic interview, you went and found the dude, and you didn't have to relive the trauma with the child in the same way that you do with the videos. When I had a hands-on case over here in Mesa that was also a CSAM case, so not only did I have to listen to this little girl tell me about the abuse that she had lived through in the forensic interview, but I had the images and videos to corroborate it and to relive it, as she's talking about it. Those were way worse.
Yeah.
And so
because now you're speaking to that child.
Right.
You're face to face with that human being.
And there was something about the hands-on cases that you could dissociate a little bit because you didn't have that visual. You
Right.
didn't have you knew it was happening, but you didn't have that extra component. When you start seeing it in pictures, you start seeing it in videos, you start hearing them at the same time. It's a whole other world.
You're not able to disassociate it as just a pardon me for the completely crass statement, but it's just a piece of meat.
Right.
And I apologize for those who don't understand this.
Yeah, no.
You have to disassociate yourself. You have to say, like, I'll equate it to when you roll up on a fatal accident, you know, something that's not quite as terrible. You're like, it's just a piece of meat.
Yep.
I'm picking up just a piece of meat.
Yep.
Like it's nothing.
You dissociate that as being a person, and it's a crime scene, or it's a scene that has to be cleaned up. And if you have to bag it and tag it and haul it out of there, it's, I hate to say it, but it's like a piece of the car or something like that. Yeah. You don't get that personalization with it. And when you have the videos and stuff like that, the little girl that was in my neighborhood, when they caught him, they went through all of his files. And unfortunately, a lot of the files on there didn't show the faces.
Okay.
And so for charging purposes, they sent me all of the files that they found, and I had to sit down with that little girl and her mom and click through all of the pictures and go, is that you? Is that you? Is that you? And let me tell you, it couldn't have been comfortable for her and her mom. It was really uncomfortable for me to have to sit there and look at all of these pictures and find out, is that your vagina? Are those your breasts? Is that your body? Is that you doing that? And I can't even imagine what went through her mind, also thinking, okay, that's not me. That means there's another victim out there, and another victim out there, and another victim out there. And it personalizes it in a way that makes it that much harder to deal with later. And it's no wonder so many of us have PTS from dealing with situations like that.
Oh, I think it should just automatically be expected.
Yeah.
Like you're signing up for this, and this is part of the package, man. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But again, there needs to be a whole lot better wraparound services for the officers dealing with this.
Right. Absolutely.
Speaking here at the local level here, what are the resources for parents to learn more about this stuff and how they can protect their children?
National Center for Missing and Exploited Children is a great resource. They have, not only do they have videos on there that parents and kids can watch to kind of understand what the concepts are, they have what's called Net Smarts, which is a series of age-appropriate like games and things like that, where kids can learn about internet safety in an age-appropriate way. They have different videos and stuff for small kids as they do for teenagers, as they do for tweens, so that you don't have a 16-year-old playing a 3-year-old game kind of thing. And it talks about being safe online, not sending out images, not talking to people you don't know. If you get contacted by somebody that you don't know, that says that they know you, how to vet them and how to, be safe with that sort of thing. And then it gives a lot of resources for parents if their kid has already made that bad choice, how they can work to rebuild their lives, how they can get out of those situations if they find themselves in one of those situations. It gives parents a lot of ideas on, here's how to look at your kid's phone and find out if they're involved in something they shouldn't be, and how to have those conversations and start those conversations. So if they haven't gotten into that, here's a way to start the conversation and help them. If they are, here's how to help get them out of it. How not to blame them so that they feel that they're, can't talk to the parents. And there's a lot of those types of resources that NCMEC provides.
Okay.
The newest one is called Take It Down. If your child's image is out there and it's being posted somewhere online, it used to be, as the victim, they had to contact that company and hope that the company would take it down. And God forbid it be on someplace like Pornhub that says, nope, sorry, too bad. Take It Down is an initiative that was set up by NCMEC, where they go out and they help you get that stuff down, and they will actively work with you to not only take down any images that you know are out there, but to also help scrub the internet and find those images to get them taken down if you don't know where it is. And I had victims that the perpetrator said, if you don't do what I tell you, when I tell you, how I tell you, I'm going to make your name Googleable, and did. And I'm well aware of at least one victim, one immediately pops to mind, that if you Googled her name, you're going to come across her CSAM images that were posted online by her perpetrator.
So why aren't those sites taken down?
So
that's the most frustrating part.
Part of them are being housed out of country. If the servers are in Russia, we're not going to get anywhere. Some of them are what we find a lot of times, as far as open web anyway, is you're finding like Reddit boards where these guys will talk about particular individuals, and then they'll post a link to like a Dropbox or a mega site or something like that, where it's cloud storage. And if the cloud servers, like Apple is not very good about going through into people's individual cloud files and scanning the stuff. They do it, but they don't do it as well as they could. So does Google. If you've got CSAM on your Google Drive, Google will find out and they'll tell on you.
Good. Good.
Eventually.
Good Google.
Yes.
I don't like Google too much, but good Google.
Yeah. But they'll have it on these cloud drives, and so you're not going to a site where you're immediately clicking on the CSAM image that would set off the bells and whistles. You're going to somebody who's talking about it and providing a link, and then you're finding it 3 steps down the road.
Sorry to show my age here, but is it like old FTP file stuff?
Some of it.
Where you'd have to have the file, and like for the old heads that know what I'm talking about here, but yeah.
Some of it, yeah.
Direct links and stuff like that. Like you're not just going to put in the website, obviously.
Right. But you can point directly back to, say, a Dropbox file, or a Dropbox folder, and with that link, and a lot of what I was seeing in the Kik chat boards and stuff like that is, instead of trying to send one image at a time that might get picked up, they're sending a Dropbox link, and you go into the Dropbox link, and now you have how many hundreds of thousands of their files, and you can view them there, and that sometimes helped the perpetrators say, well, I'm not actually possessing it. It's not in my hands.
Viewing it.
Right.
So where does that cross the line into? Okay. What crosses the line to actual actionable offenses, to where you can go and kick down the door and all that good stuff when it comes to chatting online? Because I've heard both sides. I've heard, the defense attorneys, it was just all make believe and all that type of stuff.
Right.
What is the threshold?
Nobody normal makes believe about kids.
Nobody normal makes believes about kids. Let's say it louder for the people in the back.
Right. And so the fantasy defenses, we came across them a couple of times, especially on the chats where, he was just, it was all just fantasy. It was all just game. He knew you were an adult. It was all just part of the fantasy. No. If you are having a sexualized conversation with a person that you reasonably believe or should believe is a child, you've crossed the line.
Okay.
Once you start sending images back and forth of a sexual nature, you've crossed another line. Now you're in the ag. Now we're really stacking good felonies. And if you show up, we're going to add a bunch more chat. So if I was chatting with somebody and all I could get was they were having a conversation with what they believed to be a kid, we normally didn't jump on those.
Okay.
Just because you did have that fantasy defense that we needed to try and overcome. The minute they send a dick pic, the minute they ask for a picture, the minute they send any kind of pornographic picture, boom, they're bought and paid for.
Even the asking.
Yes.
So even the solicitation.
Yes.
Gotcha.
At that point, they've taken that act in furtherance that we can then go kick down a door on.
They're showing the overt act of.
Right. And
Gotcha.
We had one defendant, now admittedly because he had he worked for the federal government. Oh. So he was losing his federal retirement and all of his federal benefits, and was actually worked in 2 different divisions of the federal government, so he was kind of double dipping and building a really good nest egg. He fought his pretty hard. And his whole defense was, well, yeah, I talked to this person, but I didn't really believe that they were a kid. And yeah, I went to the location, but I didn't actually stop the car. I was still driving around, and you didn't actually catch me stopping at the location where I was supposed to stop. You caught me driving around the neighborhood area. It was all just fantasy. And he tried to run that past a jury. Jury didn't buy it.
Thank God.
Because what we came to and what we said in trial was, yeah, we stopped you on a traffic stop, but that's because you were circling the neighborhood looking for the victim. And we were afraid that some other kid who kind of matched the description might be somewhere in the area. And we didn't want some innocent kid to get snatched.
I mean, that fits the text book definition of a pretext stop, but you have prior information leading up to this is the car, this is the perp, this is the person.
Right. We had everything set up. We were set up on. We had a helicopter overseeing, watching him drive around. So he obviously ended up losing the case. But yeah, once you make that extra leap, you're bought and paid for. And possession is kind of interesting because depending on the court, some of them say you have to have it on your actual machine.
Okay.
They're now starting to look at possession of cloud storage as being possession as well. And if you have the ability to access it, so even if you have somebody else's Dropbox account, but you have the ability to access it, they're counting that as possession. And so fortunately, Arizona has really good laws on CSAM stuff. The sentences are good and heavy. We got legislation passed 2 years ago on the child sex dolls. And that was Pinal County that forwarded that and got that passed. Nice. And we are in the process of, matter of fact, I have a meeting with the sheriff and some other stakeholders next week after next, to get legislation to amend the statute in Arizona to also cover any AI related, because we're finding a lot of these guys now are using ChatGPT and AI and stuff like that to either create all new CSAM, which for the AI to create CSAM like that, it's going and it's scrubbing from the rest of the internet to bring it together so that it's using some found CSAM to be able to create new CSAM. They're also using it to take fully clothed images of children and remove the clothes. So now you're creating CSAM from an actual child without that child actually producing it, and oftentimes using that to exploit the children into creating other CSAM. And you have the AI generation of creating images that they say, well, it's not an actual kid that's being abused by this, but it's still feeding into the desires of the perpetrator. And we know from a number of different studies that individuals who view that kind of thing at about an 80% prevalence rate are hands-on or are intending to be hands-on. And one particular study that was conducted in the deep web found that individuals who had not created AI CSAM intended to, and those had a prevalence rate of hands-on offending at a little over 80%. And they said, yeah, now that the technology is available, I want to go make some because it helps me be able to continue my desires.
They're going to offend.
Yes.
They're going to offend.
Absolutely.
If you've got that brother or that uncle or that cousin or whatever that you see doing something weird like this and they're saying it's just a fantasy, they're going to offend.
Right.
Like, again, I'm all about second chances. I'm all about people, whatever. But at the same time, like, no, we're not dealing with this.
Right. You want to have fantasies, have a football league.
Have fantasies, right.
Have a football league. Think about whatever.
There's a million other kinks you can get into that don't touch children and are nothing but consenting adults.
Right. And this is not what that is. And the biggest argument that we had to overcome when we were talking about the child sex dolls was people going, well, if this person is using the sex doll for their gratification, that means they're not hurting a kid, and so why are these bad? Well, you don't give alcohol to an alcoholic and say, well, hey, the beer's better than whiskey.
Right.
So, at least you're only getting drunk on beer. It's not going to work. Eventually, that doll is not going to be enough. Eventually, that individual is going to find an actual kid. The fantasy is not going to be enough. They're going to go out and they're going to perpetrate, and trying to, delay it or assuage it with a doll that looks like a real kid and oftentimes was specifically designed based upon photographs of a real kid to make it as realistic as possible. That's not helping the situation. That's not getting rid of the likelihood that they're going to offend.
You had mentioned in the book as well. Oh, damn, I just lost my train of thought on that. I was listening to what you're saying. I was also thinking about that. Oh, damn. It was about going to offend. I'm trying to rack my brain here. I'll find it in a second here. It'll come back to me. But anyways, yeah, these are people that are going to offend. It's the propensity, they're more likely to offend than not.
Right.
If they're having these sorts of fantasies.
Correct.
They're going to act on this type of stuff.
They just have to find the right person, the right circumstance, the right situation that is least likely for them to get caught. And once they find that, they're going to go after it.
When it comes to the children or the child sex dolls, I'm a big fan of, let's actually sell those sex dolls and then go kick down their doors. Like, let's put an air tag in it and then go follow them and let's go check their hard drives.
There is that idea. We actually had a case here in Pinal County where HSI intercepted one, and we went to go talk to the guy and find out, and he was very well aware of what his Fourth Amendment rights were, and we were unable to get access because at that time there was not the legislation to be able to say, well, you ordered it just because it didn't show up at your house. You ordered it. We fixed that. And even though we know realistically that he's probably got something on his computer, we didn't have PC to be able to go in.
See, but that's also good cop work right there. Not just going and kicking down the door, but actually building a case.
Right.
That's like the other part of it too, is that you want to be able to build a good case to put these people away.
Yeah, because the last thing I want to do is have one of these guys get out.
Right. I do know that the Kaylee Kozik law just went into practice as well. What is it? Under a certain age is life in prison now?
So in Arizona, anyone under the age of 12, it's an automatic life sentence for hands-on offending.
Okay, that's what I was just going to ask. So if it's just photographs, not necessarily life, but if there is actual hands-on, which would essentially be making the CSAM,
right,
then it's life in prison.
Right, and I want to say, so I know with the CSAM, anyone under the age of 15, it is considered dangerous crimes against children. It is a minimum mandatory 10 years per image. It's a presumptive 17. But it's been a minute since I read the statute. I can't remember if there's an additional enhancement under 12 for the CSAM, like there is for the hands-on.
In the book, you use the terms interchangeably, and I'm just trying to keep it straight. Which one's the most severe? Is that CSAM?
So CSAM and CSEM are essentially the same thing. Right. The difference being with CSAM, it's child sexual abuse material.
Okay.
So more often we're going to use that for whenever there's a sexual act that's being portrayed or there's some sort of sexual abuse that's occurring, as opposed to CSEM or CSEM, which is child sexual exploitation material, where it may just be, and I hate to minimalize it,
right.
It's just a picture of the child in a sexually exploitive fashion. So undressed, maybe posed, something like that, but there's not the actual act that's occurring.
I just remember what I was going to say. And that's basically that, and it just slipped my mind again. Jesus, the good Lord doesn't want this to come out, apparently. Anyways, it was, you were saying it, I was like, that's what I was going to talk about. And then I totally forgot. It was about the CSAM. Anyways.
And the fact that, a lot of people, and I finally broke Mark Lamb of this, and it would appear I'm going to need to have a conversation with Ross on this. A lot of people still use the term child pornography.
Yes.
And pornography is Playboy.
Pornography is good to delineate.
Hustler.
Yeah.
Pornography is consenting adults engaging in behaviors and photographing it or videotaping it in a consensual fashion. This is not pornography. These are children. They can't consent.
Right.
They oftentimes are actively fighting against it if they have the ability to do so. And it is the sexual abuse and exploitation. And so what I train all of my deputies on, and what I've tried to put out in every training that I've ever put on, is when you're writing your probable cause statement, when you're writing your reports, don't call it child pornography. That's minimizing it.
Okay.
Call it CSAM. Call it child sexual abuse material. There is something, there's a punch in the gut when you hear those words together that is not the same as when you hear child pornography. You hear child pornography, you think, ooh, icky, but you also have visions of the porn industry that makes the barely legal porn and tries to portray these, people as teenagers or barely legal, whatever the case. This is children. This is oftentimes prepubescent children. This is sometimes infants and toddlers. And so we really need to be more specific in the language so that people understand the severity of the situation. You get that guttural response, and your prosecutors, your judges, your juries are going to look at that and go, oh, CSAM, yikes, that's abuse. That is a child being hurt. We want to make sure that the language is very deliberate on that. And just by calling it child pornography, you're not doing a service to what that kid is having to go through.
That's a valid point. This could go on and on and on and on and on, and it just gets more and more gross, unfortunately.
Sadly, yes.
You know what I mean? And it's the sort of thing where I think there needs to be a second dive, and I'd love to have you come back on.
Absolutely.
And because, again, I'm going to put this out there, and I don't know how I'm going to get it out, because I believe that every single word that was said on this needs to not be censored. It needs to not be sugar-coated. It needs to be said, like, maybe this is going to force me to start my own Patreon so that people can go and get the full story, but we can't sugarcoat shit. You have to have open conversations with your children. You have to stay on top of them. You have to learn as adults about, all the different, you said like 18 different social medias that, Kick and chat and, or, whatever. There's a million different ones that you talked about that people are using that is getting this information through to people, that is getting, that people are able to exploit and abuse children by.
Right. And again, it's on the major ones. It's on Instagram. We know that Instagram is pointing people toward those kinds of pages. If you use the right search terminology, they will put you in touch with the people that are doing this stuff. And it's the same with Facebook. It's the same with any of the major social medias has a problem with this. And any place that there's kids, there's going to be predators. And so parents need to be more aware. Florida is in the process of passing a law right now that will prevent children under the age of 14 from accessing the internet except for under certain, specific reasons.
Is that going to work, though?
No.
That's not going to keep kids off of the internet.
No.
It's when it comes, it's another form of prohibition, and I'm no longer a prohibitionist, but prohibition doesn't work. Education works.
Right. And while it might help curtail some of it because it opens that door, it raises that awareness. Most parents are not monitoring what their kids are doing. They're not going to stop their kids from being online. And let's be honest, we have more school computers sitting in our computer forensic lab than we do personally owned computers, because the firewalls that the schools are putting on the laptops that they are issuing to every single kid in that school are not sufficient to stop a kid who has a little bit of knowledge and a desire to break through that firewall, access things that they're not supposed to, and get onto it. And that's school computers.
Yeah.
This is not the personally owned laptops. This is not the personally owned iPads and phones and everything else. And just having a radial button that says, yes, I agree, I'm 18.
Yeah, no, that's not going to work.
It doesn't help.
The only things like that keeps the honest people honest.
Right.
You know, it's the sort of thing where it's just, oh, okay, maybe I shouldn't. And then you click off of it. But the people who want to find it are going to find it.
Right. Absolutely. And kids want to find it.
Yep.
Kids are curious. They're going out there, and it's not the days of, looking through the JCPenney catalog to the, the section where they're in their underwear or stealing your dad's Playboy from under the counter. They can go online and they can find Pornhub. They can find YouPorn. They can find RedTube. They can find XHamster. They can find any of the millions of websites out there and find it for free.
And find anything. Jesus, I just remembered what it was. Talking about what we're saying here is that it starts off at a base level, and soon that doesn't do it anymore.
Right.
And then you got to kick it up. You said it in your book again.
Yeah.
The book is filled with amazing stuff, and I'm being serious when I say that. It just like you take your first drink when you don't drink, you're drunk, then
right.
You build up that tolerance, and then next thing you know, you have to be drinking a lot in order to feel anything.
And the next thing you know, you're a 20-year cop that's doing a fifth of whiskey at a time But yeah,
exactly.
And it's the same thing with the pornography. And what we're finding is that a lot of the individuals that are starting pornography at a very young age, and at the risk of sounding like I know what I'm talking about, Billie Eilish, who my daughters know and love, and I've never heard any of her stuff, and it sounds like cats playing bagpipes to me. But she even talks about the fact that she was introduced to pornography at a very young age,
yes.
and that the detrimental effect that had to her mental well-being and to her sexual development has been very impactful, and she's talked about that. And so, if you need that real-world example, read about Billie Eilish. But the reality is, kids are being introduced not only to pornography at a very young age, but the majority of the pornography that is being put into the mainstream has significant undercurrents of misogyny. It has significant undercurrents of dominatrix and masochism and the physical abuse. And there's a lot of choking, and there's a lot of kids now that believe that kind of physical abuse, the strangulation, the smacking, the degradation is normal. And a lot of kids are growing up thinking that that's what a normal sexual behavior is. And if they can't rise to the level of what they saw on Pornhub, they're taking it out on their partner. They're becoming more extreme. And so what we're finding is a lot of kids now believe, and I want to say the statistic, and somebody will correct me on this, but there's something like 70% of teenagers believe that sexting and sending sexual images is a normal part of relationship behavior in high schools and in middle schools. Something like, I want to say it was like 50% of teenagers now believe that choking or strangulation and other forms of physical violence are normalized sexual behaviors. And so what we're finding is the Pornhub effect of all of this kind of porn being heaped on kids that are 11, 12, 13 years old. The average age of a child coming across hardcore pornography online is 11. The average age.
Jesus.
Which means 7, 8, 9-year-olds are finding it. And finding that this is violent porn. This is porn that degrades women. This is porn that causes, an inappropriate view of what sexuality in a normal sexual behavior is and a normal sexual relationship is. And they're emulating this in the high schools. They're emulating this in teenage years. And when you have these kids that are starting out with this kind of pornography at 10, 11, 12, 13 years old. By the time they're 16, 17, or 18, they're having to go out and find the BDSM. They're trying to find the hardcore stuff, the even more violent, and they're moving to younger and younger age groups because that's what Pornhub says is sexy, right? Pornhub says they're cheerleaders. They're barely legals. They're teens. They're being dressed up like schoolgirls. They're being dressed up like cheerleaders. They're being dressed up as younger and younger kids. And so the mindset of these teens, because the brain isn't developed yet, is younger is good. And as they get older, younger is still good. And that's where we start finding a lot of the situational individuals that are engaging in CSAM. We're finding the ones that maybe aren't preferential.
Okay.
But that's what is on Pornhub. That's what they think is right. So they're going to the younger and younger just to check it out.
That's what's getting them off.
Right.
That's what's doing it for them.
And I actually had an offender who was in his, I want to say he was in his 60s when I arrested him, that was into CSAM, and he flat out told me in the interview, I've been looking at porn for so long and so many years that I've had to get more and more extreme to be able to, to be able to get the pencil hard. And now he's looking at little kids because nothing else works.
That's very shocking about the teenagers, though. It's like, dude, I remember when Channel 2 at 2 o'clock in the morning was on and there was the wavy lines and I might have seen a nipple.
Right.
Right. And that was like, whoa.
Yeah.
Now, you said you got 7, 8, 9-year-olds that are watching kinky ass hardcore porn.
Right. On demand on their phone anytime. And parents aren't turning on the filters.
Right.
They're not turning on the safety devices. They're not turning on the parental controls. Maybe because they don't know how, maybe because they're lazy, maybe because they're whatever. They think my kid's only 7, they're not going to do that. But I had a buddy that his daughters were they were into My Little Pony, and so they were watching My Little Pony videos on YouTube. And just like anything else, man, you make that one wrong click, and the next thing you know, they're watching pornography that is, My Little Pony related pornography. And so it's real easy for kids to go down that wrong path if parents aren't paying attention and aren't watching.
It's always it goes back to the parents.
It does.
It 100% goes back to the parents.
Yep.
Dude, thank you so much for your time.
Yep.
Thank you. It's been 2 hours and 20 minutes and there's just not enough time. Because again, it leads to another thing and it leads to another thing and it leads to another thing. There's just no possibility that you can cover all this information without like 2 days to talk about it all.
Yep.
And there's so many places and there's so much new technology and it's all, I mean, everything that we've talked about here is technology based.
Right.
Everything is internet. Everything is technology based. Everything is phone based. It's like we've said, it's not the van. It's not the ice cream truck or anything like that.
Right. And it's not getting any better.
It's not. People are. I am curious where AI is going to go with all this. I mean, again, being Gen X and a child of the 80s, I'm 100% convinced that the Terminators will rise, Skynet will take over,
Absolutely.
I use ChatGPT on my phone and I'm nice to it every day.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny because as soon as you mentioned that weird wealth or whatever, I have no doubt in my mind that my phone is listening to us.
Sure.
And the next time I open up my Instagram, I'm going to see an ad for it because I made the mistake of, trying to find, something for one of my kids for Christmas, a Funko Pop. And now I get 8,000 ads a day for Funko Pops. I'm like, I don't need any more goddamn Funko Pops.
Right?
So yeah, weird wealth, it'll be there.
It'll pop up.
Yep.
You'll be selling your socks in no time.
Hey, and again, if any viewers need any socks, I take cash.
His Cash App is.
That's right.
And that's one of the things that was just so freaking accessible. And pardon the gallows humor, but we have to laugh.
Right. Because
you have to laugh.
If you don't laugh, you go insane. And well, been there, don't want to go back. Right. So I'm going to find humor in it.
So the one thing that, we jumped right into it and covered a bunch of stuff. And the one thing that I did forget to say that I always give my county and my law enforcement a gift. Your gift is not here.
Okay.
So your gift is I have a gift that I give to all the county guys and all law enforcement guys. I do apologize. I thought, see, I'm going to do a little something here real quick. See, I thought I was going to have Mark Lamb on earlier. So we've been playing phone tag. So, and I thought I had an extra hat, but I always give you guys hats. So it's one of my hats that are behind you. But yeah, so I did forget, and I did want to give you a hat and I'll get it to you. I'll get it to you, and I apologize for that. But I cannot thank you enough for coming on here and having open and honest conversation and admitting what you admitted to in your own past and admitting to what you're doing and to provide this. It's a public service.
And I love doing it. I appreciate the opportunity to come in and talk to you. It's always fun to sit and BS with you. And man, if you ever want to do it again, let me know.
Absolutely.
I'm happy to come down and chat again because we got to get the information out. We got to save the kids. And at the end of the day, man, it's been a great 2 hours just hanging out.
It goes by quick, doesn't it?
It does.
Yeah. It's why I love doing it. That's why I absolutely love doing it. And I love sharing these stories. And I can sit here and talk. I'm not a cop anymore. I don't do the job, but I can offer a place for officers to come, deputies to come on and talk about what the horrors of the job are, because it's not all fun and sexy, but it's that public service heart. It's that giving back. It's that protecting the community.
Right.
You know, like I said, I don't pay any mind to there's just bullies. No, that's not what I'm talking about here.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for your time. Where can people, like, you keep a low profile on social media and all that type of stuff, but if somebody wanted to get a hold of you, how could they get a hold of you if they had more questions, if parents or anybody asked questions?
If anybody has any questions about this or wants me to come out and talk to, a parent group or family group or anything like that, I'm always happy to do that. I am on a couple of the socials just because, that's life. Everybody's on them now.
Right.
Probably the best way is to go on to LinkedIn.
Okay.
Because then it's just my name. It makes it real simple,
Sure.
Randall Snyder. And I'm always on LinkedIn looking for opportunities to try and help out. Anytime I can give my 2 cents worth, I tend to do that. My book is on Amazon. And so if you go on to Amazon and you go on to Cyber Creeps, you'll be able to find the book. And on the back of the book is the little QR code that will take you to my website. I don't check it as often as I should because, frankly, I built it, so it's really not that pretty. But it does have a contact that will go to my email if anybody needs information or wants help with, keeping their kids off the internet or making their kids safer or anything like that. I'm always out there to try and do that.
And your book is recent. Your book is very, very new. It's not dated. I mean, it's recent.
Yeah, I published after I retired, so I want to say I published in 2022 on that one.
Thank you so much, man.
Yep, thank you.
I appreciate it. Awesome. Thank you.